Welcome, everybody. Thank you. First, we're going to be thank you for the sponsor, Del Ambiente, the LGBTQ Center, Contigo Fund, Guilford, Florida, and Gold CFL. I'm going to introduce for the speaker we're going to have today. Today, we're having a timely and important conversation around safety for our communities, and we are joined by Samantha Berrios with Guilford, Florida, Sergeant Amanda White from Gold CFL, George Wallace from the center, and Joel Morales with Contigo Fund. Welcome here. Before we dive into our panel conversation, I would like to first give the space to Samantha Berrios, who will lead us through a brief presentation on gun violence awareness and advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm just going to give a brief presentation of what Giffords is. I am Florida State Director for Giffords, and I'm going to also address gun violence in the LGBT community. So I'll promise I'll be quick. So this is not coming up. So I don't know what's not showing up over there. Well, thank you, everyone, for being so patient with the little hiccup we had at the beginning. Okay, so, well, again, I was saying I'm Giffords, Florida State Director, and you probably all have heard about Giffords, right? But Giffords started several years ago, about 10 years ago, when Gabby Giffords was shot in the head. She used to be the congresswoman for Arizona, so she went to a town hall, and unfortunately, she got shot. She survived that, but after that, after Sandy Hook, she decided that she was gonna dedicate her life to saving lives from gun safety. And the way we do that, it's by advocating for better gun safety legislation. So this is how we started. I already spoke about that. So there are actually four primary branches within Giffords. So we have a C4 in which we organize and we do lobbying for better gun safety legislation. We also have a law center where we do research and policy. We deliver policy expertise and litigation. We have a PAC that basically works to elect gun safety champions. And then we have the Center for Violence Intervention that supports violence intervention strategies. In the past year and a half, Giffords decided to start a program here in Florida, basically to try to deliver to Floridians. Why? Because most of the gun violence that's been happening here in the U.S. and one of the biggest mass shootings that we've had have happened here in Florida. Some of the things that we do is that we educate the community around gun safety. We create campaigns to fight bad gun safety legislation like permitless carry, which unfortunately just passed. We have created steering committees in different cities in Florida, just to basically have a dense group of advocates, grassroots leaders, community leaders to try to see what is happening on ground so we can craft our strategy according to what's happening here and not the other way around, right? Like it's not Washington sending, the message around here, but it's just basically us listening to what's happening on ground so we can craft our strategy to attend the problems that are happening here. We also have Gabby, who has been here supporting survivors. In that picture, we can see Manuel Oliver and Mr. Montalto, who they both lost their sons and their son and daughter in Parkland. So, and we kept educating. We went to FIU, we go to colleges and universities trying to spread our word out. And we had Sheriff Mina, who who actually spoke out against permitless carry and the dangers that it implies to law enforcement. So what have we been doing lately? Well, we have invested nearly $1 million on the Giffords Florida program. As I said before, we have launched different campaigns. One of it, permitless carry. We also did media campaigns around permitless carry. We had op-eds on the Miami Herald. We had billboards in some cities. We also created a Spanish language campaign, a radio campaign, basically trying to educate the community about the dangers around it. We also had a press conference here in Miami-Dade and Tallahassee, and we attended several partnership events across the state. Unfortunately, as we know, permitless carry passed. We know that it's a piece of legislation that it was not popular or even supported by Floridians. We know that up to 78% of Floridians oppose this piece of legislation, but unfortunately it was signed into law. And we do know that from research that we have done, that gun violence is in the top of the head of many Floridians. And from some research that it was done, we found at Giffords that gun violence is the second topic on people's minds after public safety. So that speaks volumes of how present this issue is within Floridians. We also found out that the majority of voters, particularly ticket splitters, believe that gun violence is not getting enough attention and they want stronger gun laws. And, a proof of that is how many Floridians and Americans support background checks, which is, we need it federally. We have it in some states, but we don't have it federally. So that's very important. So why are we here today? I mean, when I spoke to Ricardo, and Ricardo talked to me about, wanting to talk about la seguridad de nuestra gente and how important it is, and for us to bring this conversation to this community, and having heard the attacks that you recently had on the murals, I said we have to be there, because the violence within the LGBT community and their intersection with gun violence is so present, and that's why we wanted to share some numbers today. So the unfortunate thing is that unfortunately, the LGBT community, Americans are experiencing gun violence in high numbers. It's a epidemic that we have. However, they're not enough. We don't have the adequate funding to do specific research at a state and federal level to have specific numbers on how it's affecting our the LGBT community, Q plus community. Sorry. What are the type of gun violence that we're seeing that is impacting the LGBTQ plus community? So we're seeing that some Americans within the community are experiencing high numbers of suicide. Unfortunately, when people attempt suicides with guns, they're more likely to attempt what they're trying to do. So the numbers are really high. We see that there's victimization and from hate crimes. There's school-based violence. We also see that they face more discrimination than their peers who are heterosexual. And we also see that there's a unique risk for inmate relationships within this community too, and partner relationships. So we see that these are the areas where gun violence is used within this community. And it's very important for us that we try to address those by changing certain gun laws. And we'll go into that in a little bit. But also we have seen here in Florida, one of the biggest mass shootings in Florida, which it was false. Orlando is home to that. We had 9 people killed and 58 injured. And also in Colorado Springs, where they went to an LGBTQ club Q, where they killed 5 people and they injured 18. So we see that some of these acts are being targeted to this community. So there's, through some of the research that we have done, we have been able to prove that there's a rise in hate-based violence. The hateful bias and easy access to gun and firearms. It's a horrible combination because we have all this rhetoric going on the news talking about it, and then now we're going to have specifically here in Florida a law that is going to make people easier to get guns. So that combination is pretty alarming. We also found out that since 2010. More than 13,000 hate crimes have been targeting people based on their sexual orientation. We also know that about 1 out of every 5 hate crimes that involve a gun are based on their person's sexual orientation or gender identity. And this is a very alarming number. It's the hate crimes overall targeting LGBT community individuals rose 70% from 2020 to 2021. So that's a very big spike. And the only group the group that follows that is Asian Americans by being targeted by hate crimes. But when we talk about transgender Americans, what is this? Well, they are disproportionately impacted by gun violence. In recent years, the anti-transgender rhetoric that we have seen in the news channels and the harmful legislation that we have seen around, where it's basically trying to diminish the rights of the transgender people, has only incremented the hate, and as a consequence, gun violence has spiked within this community. So we are also seeing high numbers on suicides within the transgender community, and this number of suicides keep growing day by day. So it's pretty alarming. We also see that in transgender adults, they are 5 times more likely to attempt suicide than the general population. And we already have very big numbers of suicide attempted with guns. We're talking about that most of the gun violence that we experience in this country is carried by gun attempts to suicide. So, and when you use a gun, again, you're more likely to to be able to commit, to die out of it. And the homicides against transgender Americans are also particularly lethal when the firearms are present. In an analysis that we did on 2020, it showed that 3 out of 4 transgender homicides died from transgender homicide victims died from gun violence. So, yeah, we know it's a very complicated issue. We sometimes feel like there's no hope, but we know that when we work together, when we educate the community and we unite, we can create the change that is necessary. Again, what GIFRS does is we work so we can change the laws, so we can be all, more safe around guns, respectful of the Second Amendment. So there are ways, but what is the way? Well, we need legislative action, and some of the proposed solutions to this problem is that we here in the U.S., unfortunately, we don't have federal legislation to disarm hate. So, and I mean, not at a national level. We have in some states, but in some others we don't have. So there needs to be more restrictions to have specific hate crime legislation in place at the national level, so we can, for example, like if a person has been committed by a hate crime, they know that even if they are convicted, that they're out of their the conviction, they tend to escalate the violence. So the reality is, and their behavior. So the reality is that it's pretty likely that this person will engage with hate crimes. And what does that mean in a state where we have such an easy access to guns? So we have to push to have federal legislation to disarm hate, so these people are not allowed from getting such an easy access to guns. Then we also have red flags here in the state, but it doesn't, which is what it was passed after Parkland, but we don't have that on a federal level. So we need to push that as a federal level. I don't know if you are familiar with this law, but it basically lets the family members or law enforcement to temporarily suspend a person access to a firearm, so before they can commit a crime, or even if they represent a danger to themselves or to others. So we have it on a state level, but we don't have it on a federal level. So that's why it's so important that we push for that type of legislation. Also, regulating large capacity magazines. We all know that when a shooter comes in and they have an assault weapons, these large capacity magazines, can do a lot of harm in very little time. So there are ways in which we can advocate to have those capacity magazines, the number of magazines decrease, and the reasoning behind that is that research shows that when a shooter has to stop and reload the gun, there's when usually law enforcement or others can stop the shooting. So that's why we are pushing this type of legislation, so they can make the less harm when they commit these crimes. And promote and support additional funding for gun violence. Unfortunately, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we don't have enough funding to conduct research and to understand an issue. We have to and be able to find solutions to the problem we're having. It's important that we collect data and research about the very basics of this. And one of the communities that will be greatly benefited from this is the LGBT community plus community, which I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. We don't unfortunately have very specific data on it. So looking ahead in Florida, what are we planning to do? We're going to keep doing research to try to find, exactly the data necessarily to be able to propose solutions when we advocate for gun safety legislation. We're also going to keep working on educational campaigns and advocacy campaign, and we're going to keep organizing to make Florida safer. And that's it. I mean, I know I went really quick over this, but just wanted to give you an overview of the work that we're doing over here. We're not going to give up, and we're going to try to make Florida a safer place from hate. My information is there. I'm here in Florida, and also we have Cassie Bars, who's our development manager, if you want to contact her. And that's it.
Thank you, Samantha, for sharing all this information with us. Now, we're going to have some specific question for each panelist and one question for all at the end. After that, we take questions from the audience and from the Facebook Live. First question is going to be for George. Oh, you're going to move then? Yes, yes, I know. Because I'm going to put it in the front. So the first, the first question is for George. The center was defaced with anti-LGBTQ messages and hate symbols just a couple of weeks ago. There have been other actions that mean to threaten your operation, particularly during the legislative session. Can you share what other kinds of harassment or violence has the center faced, and how are you managing safety for staff, for volunteers, attendees, and for yourself? Has your operation been impacted? And if so, how?
Thank you so much. So yeah, 2 weeks ago when I came into work, it was a Saturday morning. I was coming in for a special project, and our mural was defaced. And I happened to see across the street that Zebra had 2 murals that were defaced. And it's not the first time that we have been victims of this type of crime. However, we had swastikas and crosshairs painted on the building, which is extremely targeted and extremely upsetting. Orlando Police Department has been fantastic working with them and the FBI, because this is being classified as a hate crime. It's just really concerning. As far as operations go, yes, we've had to cease operations one time, and that was in November of last year. We were doing Drag Queen Story Hour, and unfortunately, we received some online threats, and also there were some other online threats that I wasn't privy to see, but ADL, Orange County Sheriff, and Orlando Police really took those seriously. So they came and worked with us, and it was in the best interest for the community, since it was an event specifically for children, that we cancel it. So we did cancel the event, and we did have some protesters. It wasn't to the magnitude where it could have been. We did have neo-Nazis show up, but because of the police presence, they actually went to International Drive and had a rally down there. I watched it in the building live as it was happening, and of course they had promised their followers that they would march and protest at the center. So they were at Icon Park, and they purported that they were at the LGBT center. But we don't have a location on iDrive. They were actually in front of a Shake Shack, and they said that they were in front of the center. Again, that it's alarming because this past weekend, there were over 150 neo-Nazis wearing red shirts and black masks, but they were in Altamont Springs. They were at Disney, and they were in downtown Orlando. And Florida is just a place where it's expanding, and I don't understand why this is happening. A lot of rhetoric, a lot of political insight that is happening, and it's just the LGBTQ community has to remain vigilant and safe. I do disagree with travel bans. I know some organizations have said don't come to Florida because it's not safe, but if we're not visible, the laws are trying to erase us, right? So we have to be visible and still remain safe. And we've added precautions for staff and for our clients. We had an event Saturday night, and we hired an additional security firm. And we did screenings, and we checked IDs, and also had a metal screening. And we've never, ever had to do that at one of our events. But I felt in the current climate that is what is going to be best for the community. So we did do that. We have 13 security cameras, internal and external. We need more. And funding, of course, as you talked about earlier, finding the funding for that isn't always as easy as people may think, because they're just like, oh, you can get a security system or you can get a camera really easily, just write a grant. But it's not. There's not a lot of funding specifically for LGBTQ centers. So it is alarming, and we keep watching and we keep doing what we have to do, but we're not going anywhere. We're not going to go away. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, George. I'm going to have a follow-up question. How you identify who are the main bad actors leading these acts or violence? Is there any accountability?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. How you identify who are the main bad actors leading these acts of violence? And is there any accountability?
Yeah, so it's neo-Nazi groups, it's Proud Boys, it's white supremacists, and they have a lot of online presence. They like to put things out. They have talk shows. We've been tagged in. So yeah, those are the ones that are doing it. And again, so many of the people that are doing it are coming to the state of Florida. They're outside. We had a lot, and from other parts of the country, Georgia, that were coming here to Florida. I personally have gotten mail. I know that other organizations have gotten hate mail. A lot of times it's religious, but more recently, in the past year, I've gotten 2 really targeted threats, and one said that I should be hung in the public square. And that is from someone that was on Facebook, and click on their profile, and they're not local, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to travel. They're brave enough to make these threats, so you have to take these threats seriously.
Thank you so much, George. Now we go, Sergeant White. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate everything you do for us and our communities here in Orlando. Can you speak to us to what proactive steps is Gold CFL and OPD taking to ensure LGBTQ plus people and other groups that are target actors?
Thank you for having us here. We are very aware that this is a scary time, and there's a lot of fear in a lot of different groups because of the things that these groups are experiencing. And we want to continue letting everybody know, everybody within the city of Orlando, particularly the LGBTQ community and any community experiencing hate and bias motivated crimes or discrimination, that we are also here as the police department, as GOAL CFL. If you're not aware of GOAL CFL, that stands for the Gay Officer Action League of Central Florida. And we are a partnership of multiple agencies, civilians, sworn law enforcement officers that work to ensure we're all being trained, we're all on the same page. We're providing training for other agencies so that they can come up to speed with some of the policies and standard operating procedures that larger agencies like mine, the Orlando Police Department and Orange County Sheriff's Office have been maintaining for years. And so unfortunately, some of the parts of our job is more reactive. So we're responding to those calls for service where some crimes have already happened. But there are proactive things that we are doing, and part of that is maintaining the Safe Place program. If you've seen those stickers, it's a rainbow sticker identifying the business that the sticker is placed upon, that it's a place where you can go and report anti-LGBTQ crime or any hate or bias motivated crime free of harassment or judgment. It's not only a place you can go if you need assistance, but it shows community members, patrons of those businesses, that the business supports them and that they're in partnership with the police department. So if something bad happens to you, you know that you can go to one of these locations and get help, and know that the officers that are responding are here to support you and will hear you and have been trained on some of the LGBTQ competency, terminology, policies that we hold, and that there is no judgment or harassment coming from the police department. If that does happen to you, if you are a victim, or if you feel you're being further victimized by improper treatment by law enforcement response, we want to know that too. And that's something we don't tolerate. So we continue with the message that we're also here, we're present, we're not going anywhere, we're here to support our community. And that comes from the top, where our mayor is very supportive, Mayor Buddy Dyer. The Orange County mayor is very supportive as well, Jerry Demings. So that message of, you know, we're not going to back down, and we're not going to stand for hateful rhetoric or messaging or defacing our murals or enacting violence on our community members is not okay. Unfortunately, sometimes that still happens, and we want people to know that they can make those reports to law enforcement free from fear that they're going to be further judged.
Thank you, Samantha. I'm going to have a follow-up question. Are there trainings or other resources that community members might tap into to improve the safety of their organization, business, staff, and loved ones?
Yes, we have training through the Gay Officer Action League. We provide training to local law enforcement agencies about the current legislation, any upcoming new events or things that are happening, terminology, any cultural competency things that might come up or have changed or that we need to stay on top of and be aware of. The agency that I work for provides training for the officers that are responding to calls. We have a bias-free policing policy, an LGBTQ liaison program, standard operating procedure, and an engaging with transgender and gender nonconforming persons policy. So everybody that comes through our department is made aware of those policies. They have to read the policy. They have to sign the policy. Not only that, but we give them extra resources through myself and through our liaison program that includes allies and other liaisons as resources for them out in the field if they encounter a call or a situation that they're unfamiliar with. And they can call us and we can walk them through it. We can help them. Any business that is interested in learning personal safety techniques, they can contact our police department, and our community relations department will offer training to that business. And that includes how to make your business safer, how to reduce the possibility of becoming a victim, what to do if you are a victim. And that is, it's available to anybody. So specifically to LGBTQ community members, we've had businesses that have reached out and wanted to take part in that training so that they can better prepare their staff and their patrons. It's available for everybody, and All you have to do is ask to be a part of it, and we'll have somebody come out and teach you those skills.
Nice for Joel. Joel, you have been at the forefront advocacy and providing resources for the LGBTQ plus and the Latinx communities here in Orlando, and you are no stranger on dealing with the aftermath or acts of violence against our gentlemen. Can you speak to us as to the role philanthropy plays in ensuring the safety of our communities?
Thank you so much for that question. And first, I want to say I wish we wasn't having this conversation, right? When we talk about gun violence, for me personally, what I want to share is I remember as being a proud Latinx, Puerto Rican, queer person, I started learning about gun violence when I was like 6 years old, whenever I learned that my family member died. And for me, as a Latino growing up, gun violence was normalized in a sense. I will go to parade events or different atmospheres and different environments, and gun violence was just part of it. It was like pretty much normalized for me for many, many years. And I used to live in Puerto Rico and north in Massachusetts, and I actually moved to Florida in 2012 to be closer to the community, like feel safer, right? Be closer to my Latinx community, be closer to my queer community, and kind of landed me in the forefront of kind of like, obviously I'm Latino and I'm queer, landed me at working at the LGBT Center. And when we talk about philanthropy and we talk about resources, like especially Latinx and LGBTQ communities are so under-resourced. When the tragedy here struck in 2016 in Orlando, we only had very minimum assets when it came to LGBTQ communities, like the Center, Zebra Coalition. But obviously, when we talk about Florida as a state, there's so many LGBTQ people that live here. Something that I learned recently is that Florida is actually the #2 state for the most transgender people to live here in the state of Florida, which is amazing, right? And like George shared a little earlier, is that we don't want to be visibilized, right? We want to be visible. I mean, we don't want to be invisibilized by all these things. And the way philanthropy can really show up is talking to those communities directly, right? A lot of times we have to talk to those impacted, learn what resources are available. As a person who now has been a forefront from Pulse, and also working on a federal level, working with OVC as a consultant for the Office of Victim of Crime, I can share, like, especially being on the ground in other communities that have been impacted by gun violence. Familiar, like here in Orlando, same thing with Colorado Springs just last year. Being on the ground, these communities, they look so different and they could be so under-resourced. What we did, right, in a sense, is, especially when Colorado, like example, Colorado Springs happened, right? We're in philanthropy right now. Contigo Fund and a few other national funders came together and started having real intentional conversations about what can we do, how can we move money and make sure that those communities that are directly impacted are having access to it and that they could be their own decision maker as far as where it needs to go. Because I know for a fact there is federal dollars, right? Which the program I work under for the federal office is an anti-terrorism program. So there's money for direct services, social services, things like that. First is like learning how to access that fund, because that's really hard as far as how do you apply for those grants? How do you go through that process? A lot of times those larger grants, those federal grants, as we all know, you have to have the capital ready. You have to have it already in the bank, right, in order to get those funds and get a reimbursement process. So one of my recommendations I will say as anyone who's doing philanthropy or investing money, look into the communities, see what grassroots organizations are there, who's doing the work, invest in research evaluation, because a lot of times what happens is we assume, right? We are always assuming, and that happens a lot, right? Even on a federal level, we're assuming what communities need when we're not actually talking to communities, right? And figuring it out. So really one of the steps is talk to the community, engage them, bring them together and find out what is needed and what is available and not available, and really connect those dots. Because what happened here in Orlando, right, for Pulse, is not the same what happened in Colorado Springs, right? The communities impacted may look similar, but the communities of where they're at will look different, right? We have state victim compensation, right, that covers mental health, covers reallocation services, any medical bill, and those look different from state to state. Florida victim compensation looks different than Colorado. Victim compensation in California looks different. So once again, it's like tapping into the community, learning what's happening, and really investing those dollars and moving money where the gaps are, because the gaps look different. Um, for example, now, and which I love to share, is we did have a few assets, LGBTQ assets, before the tragedy in 2016. And because of the organization I work for, Contigo Fund, we now have like 30 plus assets in the community in Central Florida alone that didn't exist prior. And we need more of those assets. We need more resources. We need more funding. As George mentioned, safety and security funding is non-existent at all. And one of the things in Contigo, what we're trying to look into is how can we build out more safety and security funding, as we're having conversations with our local grantees and our local community partners, and all these attacks that are happening. How can we protect ourselves? How can, versus online versus having brick and mortar versus all these different aspects that takes a lot of money, a lot of money. So I would say invest in communities, and really be intentional about how we move money and where we're moving money to. And also, once again, like what happens to, which is okay, right? When I'm traveling to different instances of mass tragedies, like Uvalde, you've been working with them closely as well. A lot of times money is invested, and sometimes invested in the wrong area, right? And then the community is left with, okay, that's great. We have lots of money for mental health services, but we already had like a lot of mental health services. What we really could have used allocation is for maybe rent assistance and stuff like that. Because when people go through violence, right, they're not thinking about mental health right away. They're thinking about how I'm gonna, pay my bills, my utilities, and a lot of those immediate resources are not there.
Thank you, Joel. I'm going to go to Santiago almost answer how we can support and expand the efforts that you are leading.
I appreciate this question because one of the things that we're working on right now, we're hosting a symposium in November. It's a 3-day symposium where obviously we're talking about gender affirming care because there's a lot of attacks on that. But a majority of it is around safety and security. So we're bringing different communities from the South, right? Because obviously these attacks are happening. We're seeing a lot within the South right now, especially the Proud Boys organizing, because we have seen those chapters even multiply since January 6th, right? I forget what it tripled as far as membership goes, and we see it increase here in Florida. So one of the strategies that we're working on is we're doing a convening this November to really talk through data, information, evaluate, talk to the community, figure out what ways or what's missing and what gaps, and really identify those really intentionally and kind of bring a report together and hopefully present that nationally to other philanthropy efforts to maybe hopefully invest money into our community here, as we know that these violence and acts are increasing. So that's something that we're working on right now for November, and getting a lot of community collaboration to make that happen.
Thank you, Joel, for that. Now I go for Samantha. The issue of gun violence is not specific to one community, and here we are at the intersection of many communities who are oftentimes the victims of violent crimes. What is being done to your organization to uplift those that are survivors of gun violence?
Thank you. Well, to begin with, our organization, as I already told you, has been founded by a survivor of gun violence. So therefore, we are very intentional on shedding a light and giving a platform to survivors so they can tell their story. The work that we do focuses on policy, intervention, and prevention. And in that sense, nobody understands the importance of the work that we do better than the survivors of gun violence. For example, this week we had a training in Colorado where we trained survivors on how to advocate. And some of the places in which they have been able to add value and share the stories are in some committees, for example, in different legislation, sharing the story to try to push against bad gun safety legislation or trying to support good gun safety legislation. Some other work that we have done is that we have created a toolkit for survivors that we created with survivors and an organization called Survivors Empowered. And in that sense, that's a resource that we have available and that we always make available after a mass shooting. And I'm sorry, I wrote them down because we do so many things. We also have supported survivors by trying to help them out to lend their voices. For example, this year actually, we had a group of survivors who wanted to support an initiative to raise the age on assault weapons in Texas. And they did not have the resources to go to the Capitol. And so we supported them and we were able to take them to Austin and they were able to join a lobby day with several other gun violence prevention organizations. We also have our Center for Gun Violence Intervention in Giffords, and one of the things that we do is that we create partnerships with local CVI organizations in different states. And another example of the work that we've been doing is that we have also been very present in Uvalde. We created a report when we basically had some of our team members going into Uvalde and trying to identify some of the needs on ground and were the resources that needed to be put in place so the community could heal. And so we created a report and that report's available. And we also do some litigation work. We sometimes have law firms that do pro bono work. So we try to connect survivors with these law firms. And well, that we do much more than that. So those are some of the ones that are more visible and that we all have been working on lately.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do a question for all the panelists. And we're going to have a short answer of 1 minute each. What do you need from us, from those watching, and from all the allies? Who wants to start with a minute?
To excuse me, to continue to educate yourself, and if you're an ally of the LGBTQ community, don't be silent. Be an active ally. There are so many ways to support organizations. If you're not able to give to a nonprofit financially, you can volunteer your time, sometimes sharing a social media post or attending an event. Be visible and be active. So that is my advice. And continue to research and educate your friends about the anti-LGBTQ laws, the ban on transgender and gender nonconforming people being able to use a bathroom, which is crazy to me, right? Like, just educate and open the conversation and talk. Except at the Thanksgiving table. Thanksgiving is off, but every other day of the year, you need to be an active ally.
Yeah, and just kind of echo off of that, just being an accomplice, right? Just not an ally, because that's not self-described. It's actually showing up unethically, not saying you're an ally, but just actually being there. And ending gun violence, I think it takes all of us. It takes every single intersection of people to really, really address this issue. So it's up to all of us, right? It's not an isolated incident. This is every single community really advocating. And when you see policies or anything, just being out there campaigning, whatever it is that we can do to end gun violence, that we're not talking about this in 10 years, right? I really feel like we can do that, but that collectively we have to come together.
I say for us, it's continued partnerships, communication, and a little bit of understanding in that law enforcement is not in control of the legislature. So we are at the mercy of balancing enforcement and engagement. And we want to do that the best that we can. And so that really plays in part with you all to help us by communicating what you need, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what can we do better, and just understanding that we all have different roles, but we all want to work together and make it safe for everybody.
My last thing I have to say, I forgot. Vote. I think sometimes getting out there, we have all of these laws that are being passed by politicians and legislators. And if we don't like that, then our voice is, at the end of the day, they're here to serve us. And we can vote people in and we can vote people out. That's all I'm going to say. But register if you're not registered to vote. And it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. Educate yourself, research the candidates, research those policies that are important to you, and call your local elected officials. Ask them questions and hold them accountable.
Thank you. So I'm going to echo what everybody has said. Education is the most important piece of this. Get yourself educated on the issue that you're interested in, whether it's gun violence or LGBTQ, so you can go and have that dinner conversation or that talk in the barbecue that your neighbor has invited you, and let them know specifically related to gun violence that you can be respectful of the Second Amendment and also be safe around guns. There are ways. I mean, it's just not that we're going to take away your guns. There are several ways in which we can be safer around them. There's a way. We just need to be able to communicate in a rational manner with our family members, with our friends, with our community members, because there are ways in which we can save lives from gun violence. That's one thing. Then the other one, again, echoing what Georgia said, we need to elect gun safety champions. We need to elect LGBTQ plus rights champions. We need to educate ourselves. So who are those candidates? And go and elect them, support them, because they are the ones who will advocate for your community. We at Giffords can specifically ask you to join our Twitter rapid response team. Sometimes information is just what our community needs. It's another way to get educated. So if you want to talk to me at the event, I'll be happy to add you to that. And then just let us know if there are any events in your community in which we can come and educate people. I'm in Miami, but I travel here often. And so Zoom is a great resource, so also available if I can't come. And that's it. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you say. Before we continue, I'm going to ask, is any question from the audience for the panel? Carolina? I think I want to process.
Hello, thank you everybody. This has been very informative. I wanted to see, at Poder Latinx, we work a lot of the intersectionality between immigrants who might have mixed statuses and the LGBTQ community. Wanted to see maybe what you have all seen in the community and how we can help resources and things like that. Or maybe specifically, like, as well as safety and how they feel with what's going on right now.
Sure. When you talk about marginalized communities, of course, that comes into play. One of the things that I hear from the people that we serve is oftentimes people that are undocumented are afraid to come forward because they think that we're gonna call and have them taken away, and most nonprofits are not going to. We're safe spaces. The center is a safe space. So if you come here for HIV testing, if you come here for a legal referral, we actually do immigration clinics. If you are here for any type of group, know that it's a safe space, and we will do what we can do to protect you, and we're not going to call ICE. We're going to serve you. We don't ask you your status. We don't ask you if you even identify as LGBTQ. We're here to serve all Central Floridians. It just so happens that we are an LGBT center. We're led with that. but it's a great privilege to serve that community. I know that it's pretty prevalent here in Central Florida, and specifically, in West Orlando and Apopka. So it's great, and we also meet people where they are, because a lot of times there are bigger issues than just being undocumented. There's the lack of education, lack of transportation, and we need to continue to educate our people that at the end of the day, we're all human. So.
No, thank you for that question, because especially when we talk about our undocumented folk that live here, right? I just want to preface this, that especially on the federal level, you do have the right to resources. I know, working as a case manager after the Pulse tragedy here, we had a lot of people that were undocumented, unfortunately. And something that people don't realize is that when you're undocumented, and this is no matter what state you're in, right? You're undocumented, you're part of an act of violence, whether it be human traffic, whether it be gun violence. You do have the right to victim comp. You do have the right for many other resources. But the thing about it is, how do we get that information out to our folks who may not know that, right? Because I could tell you right now, especially like the victim compensation form, when you're filling that out, is asking for a social security number, right? And people feel like, already that's pushing me out. I'm not even gonna fill it out. That's not for me. And a lot of times it takes advocates, right, to really kind of bridge that gap. There's things like U visas, where if you are here and you are experiencing a crime, or you have been part of a crime, like let's say Pulse, for example. Unfortunately, that whole system, U visa, could take years to go through that process, but it is a right for them to get access to. But obviously, there's, especially in philanthropy, when we're talking about like what can we invest money into, maybe like lawyers, right? Pro bono lawyers that can help people kind of navigate that system. But there is resources, but it's just understanding and education on where can I do that, and how can we as advocate make sure to connect those dots. Because what I can share too is, like, when you're experiencing a crisis, right? A mass tragedy happened. If you're not educated already, you don't know this information, you're trying to figure it out in that moment, right? So the more we could educate ourselves and know that all our communities are being protected, whether they have paper or not, that there is support there, right? And we have to educate ourselves, and that way, and also policies, right? I would say this also, making sure within your own internal policies and stuff like that, that you do say that publicly, anti harassment, we don't discriminate, right? Those, making sure that we have those in place.
Thank you. I know, I'm sorry, I had to answer the question too, part because, part of the panel, but it's part of my organization and part of my passion is that you just mentioned. And we're working together, so, what we're looking is the intersectionality between undocumented, LGBTQ, trans. Is when you say, and I always say the totem, or the people called more marginalized than ever, I put in your mind, imagine you, a transgender woman in a ICE detention center right now. So they got all the intersectionalities, because she's there because she's undocumented, but she's also trans, and they don't get the benefits. So what I try to say is work together. We all, I love the answer you did here. Nobody's going to close the door for them. You don't want to close the door for them, because we're working in this together. Intersectionality is education, coming together and bring everybody, because again, a trans person is also an immigrant, is also a person in hospital, is also a person need to go to the restaurant. So we have the same rights. So undocumented have the same rights. More difficult than everybody, because unfortunately they don't have the papers, the word is paper, but they're still the same human. We have to work together. So great question. The thing, you want the answer, we have to keep in what we're doing. We have to keep in this meeting. We have to keep in this always, and keep doing and doing and doing, and bring more people to the picture. Because I don't want to go political, but we are more together. So we can win and we can vote. Yeah, I'm going to say that. So you had any more questions from Facebook? Or Yep. Okay. I'm going to say thank you for the audience. Thank you for the people to up, and really thank you for this panel. Thank you for your time, you coming here. Thank you for the sponsor, Ricardo. Thank you for bringing these people together. And that was a really important conversation, and I hope so we're doing. Thank you, George, for coming in your vacation and stay with us. That's really important for us to see you here when you deserve to don't be here. So thank you, because that means the importance of the community and all of you doing that. Thank you so much.